Okay, so welcome to our My Moon Power Musings. I am beyond excited. Like, it is an absolute dream come true for me to be talking to both of you today. Today we've got Alexandra Pope and Sjanie Hugo Wurlitzer. I'm struggling.
Wurlitzer.
I so struggle with your last name. I tried really hard there, sorry. And so I know both of you from going deep diving into your work, and like the first course that I took with you both was Wild Power, was one in London, and then I took your Red School training, which is the most detailed and incredible menstrual cycle training. Like, if anybody is interested, you must absolutely take this course. And then you're also the co-authors of Wild Power. And where I live is a place called the Apothecary Garden. We've got loads of rooms, and every single room has a copy of Wild Power in it. No,
Wow.
not joking. Yeah, totally. Yeah.
Wow. Am I allowed to say something?
I know.
Am I allowed to say something like, so it's like the new Bible?
It totally is. It's so interesting because where I live is on the land of the perfumer who I made the MYMOON Power oils with. And so when I came to him with the idea of My Moon Power, which it didn't have that name at the time, and I spoke through all of the phases of the cycle, and I spoke about like how I felt in each phase, he was like, "Oh my God, why doesn't everyone know this?" And I was like, "I know." So he brought all the women in his business, which is like a big business, which is like, you know, very female focused. They all got copies of Wild Power.
Wow.
Yeah. Totally. So like there's a big advocate here.
That is so lovely.
That is incredibly beautiful to hear, Chloe. And thank you to you for initiating that. And no doubt there was something to do because you're so plugged into this. There's something I remember about you. You're so plugged into this that the way you would have explained that or shared that would have come so from your own lived experience that it's almost impossible for people not to get the power of it when they hear it from somebody who's really living it and breathing it as you are. So, you know, just really huge gratitude to you and to you and your practice, actually.
Oh,
yeah, that's so amazing.
yeah. Do you know, I really feel that when I speak to a woman, and particularly like a younger woman as well, and that she's had no idea about menstrual cycle work, and I go in and I'm like, I know this is about to change her life, and like I'm like watching the light bulbs go boom 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 boom, boom. And they come to the conversation with me. I'm thinking about like women that work in magazines and things like that I've been sharing the oils with, and they come in and they're a bit like, you know, kind of and then by the end they're just totally lit up with this new like understanding of what it is to be a woman, and how like our periods can be just so incredible, and like what we can learn about ourselves. And for me it's like I get so much joy in sharing it and seeing someone else's light bulbs go on. So I can only imagine for both of you, what's it like for you sharing this work?
Oh my God.
Yeah.
I get high, actually. It's my drug of choice, I think. It's a feeling of it's like almost something that comes over me. It's a feeling of deep meaningfulness. And like gosh, it's almost like stepping into a kind of holy atmosphere. There's just yeah, sorry, you've kind of put me on the spot asking me that question, because I sort of it's big for me, Chloe. It's really, really big. I'm just almost thinking about it for the first time now. I mean, when I joke when I say I get high, but I'm also not joking.
I feel it. I think it's so true as well, isn't it? You know it with every cell of your body that it is truth. And so, and that it brings energy.
Really brings energy. Yeah, I'm thinking of the intimacy it creates between me and the other. Like even hearing your feedback about the experience you had, it sort of puts us right up close together, because I know you're in touch with something so intimate in you, and I'm in touch with that same thing in me. It's such a place of connection for us. I think that, so that's very, very strong for me, is how intimate it feels to share this work. And the other thing, and you've probably noticed this, Chloe, with your creation of this incredible ritual oil pack, is, you know, what Alexandra and I share, we haven't created in the sense that it lives and moves our bodies, but we have created it in the sense that we have put words, and we've really unfolded and unpacked the spiritual practice that is cycle awareness, and actually what the power of the cycle is, you know. So we've created it in that sense, in the whole naming and articulating and giving the kind of maps and infrastructure so that people can recognize their experience. And what happens a lot for us, and I think this is ongoing, it doesn't seem to go away, even as we've now been doing this for years and years. Every time I hear from someone the way that what we share lands with them and how real and true it is and what it awakens in them, I'm in awe. I'm like, wow, so it's real. And it's a strange question to ask, because I know it's real, but it's the thing of having your thing received. So you must experience this, I'm imagining, with your oils. You know the power of them, you know the beauty of them, and then you give them to someone and they have a response to their experience of them. And it just it sort of makes it more real for you as well.
Absolutely, 100%. And when you sent me the message of how you received the oils, I was like, oh my God, I felt like they had been truly and utterly received, because it's that you got every single nuance that I'd included. And so for me to have that feedback, I was like, oh, wow, yeah, this is it. This is really happening. And then when I share the oils in person with women, and when I really feel that they're getting it, it's like my body goes and I can feel their body aligning.
Yeah.
And then afterwards they come out of the anointing ritual and they're like, wow, something's just happened to me there, something like incredible. Yeah,
That's incredible.
Yeah, you get it. Yeah, you get it.
And I remember like coming out of Wild Power, and it was so funny because the conversation that I'd had with Rich, who I make the oils with, was just a completely random conversation a few weeks ago that I'd had with him, nothing to do with menstrual cycle. But I was saying, I was like, I find it so hard to plan my life. Like, I don't know how I'm going to wake up in the morning. Like, I don't know if I'm going to be in a bad mood or if I'm going to have energy or da da da. And he actually said to me, he said, Chloe, that sounds like a bit of a problem. Like, I'd look into that. And then I went to Wild Power and I was like, there's nothing wrong with me. I'm just a menstruating woman. And I was just like, wow. And that's also why I was so excited to tell him about it as well. And that's why, and he got it so incredibly, like, because we're very, very sensitive to energy and plants as well. So it was just it was amazing, like how the conversation like went on. Like you couldn't have mapped it out more perfectly.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
That is so beautiful. Yeah. I think that's a big part of what happens to people when they hear about cycle awareness, is they go from feeling wrong to feeling really right about who they are and how things move for them. Yeah. It's so de-shaming.
Absolutely. So how did you, so Alexandra, I feel like when I talk about you, and I hope this is okay to say, but I just am like, Alexandra is the grandmother of menstrual cycle awareness work. Like she is the grandmother. You must go and listen to the grandmother.
You can only just now use that word, grandmother. It's touch and go, but
it's touch and go.
It's touch and go, but I think you could possibly just get away with it now.
So how did you even get started on this path?
Well, I think the path has been courting me. So it wasn't like I knew anything, in inverted commas. It was that I was being organized by something. And And I can now look back and say that. And what I can sort of celebrate about myself, which I might have criticized about myself back then, is actually a capacity to follow the unknown, actually. And when I say the unknown, actually, it was actually following a kind of interesting spiritual path. Although I never kind of used the term spiritual path, but I was following something. So yeah, you know, I had a front. I was a teacher, and you know, and then I left teaching, so I went to do other things. Then I studied to be a psychotherapist and so on and so forth. But it wasn't like I wanted to be a teacher, although of course it turns out I am a teacher, but not a teacher at schools. And psychotherapy, yeah, I had a good psychotherapy practice, and but it wasn't that I had an ambition to be, you know, a psychotherapist ultimately, and you know, to keep improving my psychotherapy skills and to go on and develop it. No, it was like these were sort of place markers, or just something that they were holding pens or something. And I was also developing just important skills, not the least of which was just learning about myself and growing into myself. But underneath all that, there was something that was unfolding. And so, I mean, you know, there's various marker points along the way. But in my 20s, I was just seized by the importance of fertility awareness. You know, I mean, I flirted with the pill momentarily, and then thought, what am I putting this, you know, and just, you know, fertility awareness, and that was my contraception because I didn't want to get pregnant. So I was building something, and you know, unwittingly, and then out of nowhere on my 31st, just before my 31st birthday, I got the menstrual pain from hell and made this radical decision to believe in my body and follow it. I thought, my body's talking to me. I thought, hello. It's speaking very loudly. I mean, the pain was just off the Richter scale, bonkers. And it kept coming back each month, having never had problems. And I think it's something to do with my capacity to trust, to be able to exist in inner worlds and court inner worlds and care for that, which is probably why I went down the psychotherapy route ultimately after leaving teaching. And yeah, one thing led to another. I did heal my body. I followed natural therapies, but I gave space to menstruation. I thought, I'll give space to it, which was quite radical because I mean, I had work and everything, you know, but I don't, you know, I used to take time off, and my cycle was regular, fortunately. So I knew when I would bleed. And it was like revelation would come. Revelation after revelation. And there were one or two very early people writing about menstruation in a sort of different way. And I had those books, and I had the book The Wise Wound, which was seminal, came out in the 70s, Penelope Shettle and Peter Redgrave. And I went back to that book, and these were like props as I navigated something, Chloe. And it was like the pain, it was like, you know, Persephone being dragged into the underworld every month. I was down into the underworld, into this maelstrom of pain, and I would just stay kind of awake to it, you know, and really enter it fully. And it was like, you know, veils falling away, really, in terms of going into myself. I mean, it's a long time ago now, but I just do remember going headlong in and facing it in the, you know, headlong without painkillers. That was the thing. I didn't take painkillers. And that's how it unfolded.
Oh my goodness, it's so amazing. And I really remember when you said about giving space to menstruation, and really like that's turned into my number one practice with when I bleed, is actually just to rest. And of course I love the rituals, and of course I love like offering the blood to earth and doing all of the things, but actually like the thing that I really need the most is to really, really rest, and to allow that, and to see what happens and what comes, and I love what you said about being Persephone being dragged into the underworld, because that's what it is, isn't it? You're taken in, and those things that you need to see and that you need to face or that you need to feel is actually my one. Like, you know, I've been going through a breakup, and like each month it's been taking me time to get through it, and like this last weekend I was like, right, okay, I'm all in, and just like really went into it, and then just ultimately felt the core of my own wound, which was a feeling of unworthiness, you know, rather than the outer noise of what it could be. And I feel like that when we give ourselves that opportunity to really go into our bleed and just surrender, like that was the word. Actually, it was like I could feel it all just like kind of coming off me, like I was unraveling, and like, oh, this like, whew, a letting go. And I think we have that opportunity in menstruation, don't we?
It just, this whole extraordinary interior space opens out. It's a spiritual consciousness you step into, takes you deeply into yourself, but simultaneously deeply into a connection to something much grander than yourself. And I got to a place where I'd bleed, where, the pain had calmed down more and more and more. And I was feeling these incredible feelings coming through of, oh my God, again, I have to use that phrase, getting high. Honestly, I was getting high, but it's just feeling like, oh, wow. I'm just feeling the utter rightness of my own being. And I remember thinking, I am not a freak of nature. This isn't just some weird phenomena that I experience. This is actually what menstruation's doing, potentially, for anyone who menstruates. They're having this experience. Yeah. And then, things have just grown and grown from there. And I have to say, then meeting Sjanie, getting together, 15 years ago or so now, the combination of us together has been another huge level of revelation. I mean, everything we teach now has come through this. I had some really good rough ideas, so to speak. It was pretty good. It was pretty good. And then, some alchemy happened, and the whole thing, the articulation of things just became more and more extraordinary, really. Yeah. So
beautiful. And honestly, the way that you both hold space and how you teach in the Red School, the word that came to me over and over again was exquisite and impeccable. It was like the container that you both hold is so, I actually haven't experienced, actually making me feel quite emotional. I haven't experienced it with any other practitioners. It's because you allow the intimacy and the depth, but yet you hold this field of like everyone's holding themselves as well. And there's such a deep connection, but you're still the teachers, but you're with us too. So there's not this kind of divide where like there's the teacher up here. I never felt like that. I really felt like we were all really in it together, and this space that was held was like, yeah, impeccable was the word. I remember thinking that at the time.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, I'm feeling very moved, Chloe, to have reflection, and gosh, thank you. Everything we do, we've learned from menstruality. I want to be so bold as to say that when I hear you feed that back, Chloe, what comes to me is that's menstruality wisdom that we all actually have access to, that holding that kind of contradiction or that polarity of, the way you described it, of both kind of being together, but also being ourselves, both holding our own authority, but also being able to lean into the support and the wisdom of others. That's the cycle teaches us all these things. I'm very humbled by the wisdom of menstruality and just how infinitely wise it is. And also what a taskmaster it is, because, when we don't honor the kind of depth and breadth of that wisdom, we tend to see our asses, and Alexandra and I have experienced that many a time, make no mistake, we are for as exquisite and what was the other word you used?
Impeccable.
we are incredibly fallible and messy and awkward. It's all happening. It's all happening. I just name that.
Yeah. Always. And then Sjanie, so what was your entry into menstruality work?
Yeah, well, I was loving listening to what you shared, Alexandra, and then also your experience, Chloe, of menstruation, because both of your stories are these exquisite examples of how the way we find our way in to our lives and into ourselves is usually through crossing this threshold of or going into the underworld, we could say, or crossing the threshold of our own edge or our own knowing of ourselves. So, and that was very much the same for me. And much like Alexandra, I didn't really, most of the time, I never really knew what I was doing, but I kept doing things along the way. And I've got quite a multifaceted work life back in the day. I've done many things, including being a graphic designer, and I was also trained as a psychotherapist and hypnotherapist, and I went deeply into the world of fertility and hypnosis and so on and so forth. And the thing that I always knew was that there was actually, we use this phrase now, which I've become pretty fond of. We call it your big, bold thing. And that we all have a big, bold thing. And I really felt that. I could feel this kind of big, bold thing in me. And that something was calling me. And I was just following the kind of impulses and unknown, much like Alexandra. And for me, the cessation of my cycle, because I went on to contraception, and I completely stopped my cycles for 7 years. This was when I was in my early 20s, and I just didn't know anything other. I just thought that was the best way to be sure that I wouldn't get pregnant. But those 7 years were very much like a barren underworld. And, I experienced all kinds of things in those years, which popped my illusion of being invincible and on solid ground. Any illusions I had around the okayness of things was just really revealed to me. And then finally, when I got my cycles back, which was a bit of a process, I realized it wasn't serving me to be on the contraceptive injection. It was the experience I had of reconnection to my cycles that gave me such a deep appreciation of the power that I had not been in contact with. There's something about comparisons or kind of going from one thing to another that you get a very stark reading of the power of it. That's what happened to me. So when my cycles came back, I could really feel the color coming back into my life, my emotional life returning, my sensitivity, my capacity to connect with myself, connect with others, to feel alive and be in the flow of my life. I mean, I really went from what I call a kind of monochromatic emotional life and a numbing into this technicolor. And that just got me onto the very strong scent of my calling. And I had visions when I was bleeding, and then lots of synchronicities that led me to Alexandra, actually. first to her book and then to meeting with her in London in 2004 when she came to run her first workshop, and then it just went on.
Oh, I love it. Oh, it's so amazing. And I love what you shared as well. It's like following the breadcrumbs. And I feel like that's been so much my path as well, is I'm always like following the breadcrumb. And the same with the oils. It's like I just knew that I wanted to do it. And then each time it's like each bit came to me, and it's taken me a really long time to make it. It's taken like over 6 years. But then I look back now and I think, okay, yes, that's exactly because I wouldn't have had that piece if I hadn't, waited that long, or, knew that bit of information or something. So I think like that's such an important part of everybody's journey, to like not have that focus on like, this is where I want to be, but actually what's the crumb in front of me right now. And it allows us to be in the unfolding moment, really.
Yeah. Exactly right. And that's, that's what we're doing in our practice of cycle awareness, Chloe. It's like every day we're showing up for the place we are in the cycle today. And that is what opens us the way to the next cycle day and the next cycle day. And it's exactly the same with creative process. You've said it so right. It's really being with the bit that's here, the next, what we now lovingly call the next feeble step. Which was inspired by Mike Dooley. I don't know if you know him, but he talks about feeble steps, and that is creativity on and on, as one feeble step after another.
Yeah, exactly. Because you think I was like, right, I've birthed this out into the world now, great. And then I was like, oh dear, I need to learn how to do marketing, and I need to learn sales. I didn't think about that bit.
Yeah.
Me being a creative, I'm like already on to the next idea, and like my next oils are in production and I want to just create them. But it's the whole process, isn't it? But I'd love to touch on, because you teach the creative process, and I feel like that was so integral and so helpful for me as well, to have another blueprint and another map. So I'd love to just touch on that a little bit. I know it's a whole big deep dive workshop, so obviously just like the overview.
Woof. All right, so it's a big question. So I'm going to give you a description of what we see as the phases of the you need to go through. There are 4 phases, and it's got a creative round to it, to go from an idea into making it into a something in the world. And what's wonderful about this creative cycle process that we've articulated is that it has arisen out of our understanding of the menstrual cycle. And also we've therefore, we've looked at how the menstrual cycle can actively support you in the creative cycle, what it takes to move through a creative cycle and create something in the world. And so it's interesting, I'm sort of caught between wanting to talk about the 4 phases of the creative cycle, but I feel as though I should perhaps speak about the 4 phases of the menstrual cycle first. What do you think, Sjanie?
Yeah, I agree, because that's in a way the blueprint. Yeah.
It's the blueprint, yeah. So yes, everything we have learned has arisen out of the menstrual cycle, and the menstrual cycle is this wonderful, it mirrors the seasons of the year. It's like you move through inner seasons within your being that echo something of what happens in the outer season of the year. So we think of menstruation itself as the inner winter. We're describing how you and I are sort of dragged down to the underworld by Persephone, and that's winter, of course. Nothing is growing until Persephone returns in the spring. And so yes, so menstruation is that moment of deeply pulling into yourself and kind of easing up on outer world activities and dropping all your agendas and resting and letting go and surrendering. And then from menstruation, we move into our pre-ovulatory phase, the first part of the cycle, and we call that the inner spring. And you know, in the menstrual cycle, you know, you feel like when you're bleeding, you're never going to move again. You like, your brain's decommissioned and you never want to think about anything ever again. And you go into this lovely, you can go into this very extraordinary blissful state. And then time passes and magically something starts to wake up and you go, oh, oh yeah, especially if you've rested well. It's like, yeah, something's wanting to get going again. This is the organic nature of cycles when you honor each phase. It's just marvelous. And so you come out of your inner winter menstruation into your inner spring, the pre-ovulatory time, which has all that lovely, that's feeling of being newborn again and fresh again. Because I think we all get a little bit cynical towards the end of the cycle, you know, in our premenstrual time, it gets a bit dark and dangerous then. And it's like, oh, the light has returned. Oh, maybe the world isn't quite so, you know, bleak after all. Yeah, and maybe I am okay, having had an identity crisis just before your bleed, you know. It's just classic. And it's all as it should be. So it's just so marvelous moving through all these states. So yes, there we are in our inner spring, kind of going, oh yeah, things are good. And then of course spring leads to summer. So we move into our ovulatory phase of the cycle, which we call our inner summer. And that is the time of really kind of riding high. You know, if you've been well rested and, you know, you're feeling well nourished and so on, and in your flow, so to speak, you are now in the inner summer of your cycle and having a feeling of that everything is possible. And I think this is the state that we most think that we're supposed to be in all the time. And when we crash out of it, we think, what's wrong with me? Which is probably what you were going through all those times before you knew about cycle awareness. So it's sort of a little bit superwoman territory, the inner summer, and enormous capacity. There's a generosity and, you know, capacity to give and do and be all things to all people. And then the wheel turns, you know, and inner summer turns, you know, summer turns to autumn. And of course, we're in that moment in the year now as we're doing this interview. Yeah. And I can feel it, you know, I can feel how my psyche is having to shift gear. And I'm going, oh, I don't want to let go of the summer. And, you know, and I can feel the dark coming. But then there's another part of me that kind of digs the autumn too. And we're sort of in a tussle between that at the moment. Well, within our menstrual cycle, you know, there comes a moment towards the end of the pre-ovulatory phase where you suddenly find your energy shifts and it's like, whoop, it's like clunk. And it's like, well, no, I don't feel quite so cheery and quite so positive and quite so like I want to do everything for everybody. In fact, I think no. And what you're doing is you're moving into the inner autumn, which that energy of the premenstruum, which is what the inner autumn is it's actually just bringing you back more into yourself again, because we can get, you know, quite out there and away from ourselves in the inner summer, can't we, Sjanie? And the autumn it kind of relocates us back more into our boundaries, what our boundaries really, really are, because you suddenly come into the premenstrual phase. And, you know, that a lot of that irritability and reactivity in the premenstrual phase is us going, oh, those are my boundaries. You know, I've just been doing too much, and why did I commit to that? And so the autumn brings this brings more insight and awareness and sensitivity to things. That each phase has its powers, by the way. Really, each phase holds powers, and each phase holds a kind of shadow side to it. So the premenstrual phase is actually incredibly powerful. I used to love that phase when I was menstruating. It used to kind of really root me into my mojo. It's like, yeah, I could feel a deeper gear in me to take on difficult things and so on. And then, you know, gradually you move through the inner autumn or the premenstruum of your cycle, and you know, you come into the dying days of your cycle, and that's, you know, the end of autumn, moving into winter, shifting into the real dark. And there's a whole sort of experience that goes on there that your psyche has to negotiate. So this cycle aware, you know, menstrual cycle awareness of these seasons, what it does is it roots you into yourself. Really, it connects you with your energy, you know, the state of your nervous system, you know, your actual capacity. It keeps you connected into yourself rather than outer referencing, you know, how you're supposed to be, how you should be, and comparing yourself. It actually says, this is who you are, this is who you are. And what it does is it teaches you to respect cyclical rhythm, that if you stay permanently switched on in one state, like doing, you will burn out. The cyclical life is just eminently sane. So it's this incredible foundation, cycle awareness, for well-being and connection to yourself and knowing yourself. And I think I'm going to hand over to Sjanie here, it becomes this incredible foundation then for manifesting things in the world. You know, it teaches you about the creative process that one has to go through, which you, of course, really worked in the creating of your oils. So I might hand over to you, Sjanie, to...
Yeah, what you said there around how cycle awareness connects us so deeply to ourselves, it really struck me that what's happening is we're actually staying connected to our own development or our own path or process of evolution when we practice cycle awareness. In other words, we're really letting ourselves be created and letting our creativity at its deepest level unfold when we're practicing cycle awareness. So this is actually a really important bridge into what I'm about to say, because when you're practicing cycle awareness, you're plugged in to the creative source of you. And that's really the beginning and end, you know, of creativity. Like, we need to be in connection in order to create anything. We need that fertile ground of being in responsive relationship with ourselves day by day. Because when we create anything, it isn't just us creating. And I know in our little voice exchange we had, Chloe, after I received your beautiful oils, you said a couple of things that made me go, oh my gosh, yeah, that is so the full depth of creativity, because it isn't just us creating the thing. We sometimes think it is, and then we discover we're actually in cahoots with this larger creative intelligence. We're really in service of life. Our idea to create something is really life's idea that we're being called to create. And this is really important, because creating anything is not a solo mission. It's like us in partnership with life. So menstrual cycle awareness really keeps us in that relational field of sensing and trusting every day, bit by bit, as we follow the breadcrumb trail, as we trust the timing of things. As you said, Chloe, 6 years, it's such a great story because it's so real. Like, creativity takes her time, you know, because we have to grow up. Lots of things, there's a huge orchestration going on in the world. Like, you know, think of everyone's lives that are to rally in order for your creative project to come into being. You know, people were busy with other things, and there were, you know, there were things happening in the world, you know, all these cooperative components that had to kind of come into lineup. So yeah, it takes time sometimes. It's your story is so beautiful like that. So yeah, I'm really grateful for everything you said there, Alexandra, because it's the foundation of creativity, is being in this place of connection and this relational field, and staying resourced in the source of creativity. So yes, I'm going to take a breath there because I feel like we've said a lot. Maybe you have some questions or comments before we get into the next piece about the creative cycle.
Well, I really feel very connected to what you just said, because for me, the way that I work is it will only come through when things are aligned, and if I'm kinked in any way, nothing will ever happen. And I remember even being at school in my art class, and I would always be like, oh, I'm not getting an idea, I'm not getting an idea, I'm not getting an idea. And then all of a sudden, like, the idea, I always remember it would kind of like we'd go and then just kind of land on my lap. And now what I've know, like with my own creativity and with life, with whatever I want to manifest, if I'm not fully aligned, if I'm not fully plugged in, it's not going to come. And no matter like how much I sit there with a pen and paper or whatever, it's like it won't come until that line is there. So how do you, I guess this is maybe a good question to lead on to it, how do you get plugged into creativity? Like,
yeah, that is the perfect question, Chloe. That is the perfect question, because just as menstruation is the beginning and end of the cycle, the creative phase of vision is the beginning and end of the creative cycle. So vision is all about alignment and being aligned and receptive so that something can come to us. So you answered the question right way back when you spoke about rest. In fact, in that moment, I was going to say, yeah, that's the everything. You know, rituals are very rich and symbolic and have a power of their own. But when we really want to connect with the power of the cycle and the power of creativity, it's about what we can do to really drop ourselves into the process that is already happening. And when we are in our doing mind, so think first half of the cycle, that's all about agency and action and will and having an agenda, you know, trying to find a solution. When we're in that mind, that is not the state of receiving vision. Vision comes classically at menstruation. So what that means is that we need to interrupt the doing, and we need to drop our agenda. We need to let go of trying and really just give ourselves over. And we practice that every month at menstruation. That's what you're doing, Chloe. And giving yourself over sometimes looks like feeling what's there to be felt. Sometimes looks like going into the tiredness that's there. It doesn't necessarily look like inspiration at first. But as we described, that's the gateway in, is the surrender into whatever is. And that's us coming into alignment. That's really us coming back into contact from that outer inner summer energy. It happens through the premenstruum. We're starting to feel, we're starting to really notice how we are. We're really coming back engaged with ourselves and our sensitivity. And that alignment then opens us into, I want to say, the unknown. That's where everything comes from. Yeah. There's one other thing I can say about that. Let me see if I can find the words. See, oftentimes we don't realize, but when we're in the doing mode or the agency mode, in other words, the kind of inner spring, inner summer energy, we're just working with what we know. That's all we've got access to. It's very much the realm of conscious awareness. But when we come into the second half of the cycle, we actually suddenly expand and come into contact with unconsciousness that starts to become conscious. So we're moving into the unknown places in ourselves. And that's very destabilizing. But that's where it gets really exciting, because that's where something other lives. And you kind of got to hold your nerve a bit, because it's uncomfortable on the way down, you know? It is uncomfortable.
Yeah, and then crossing that divide into menstruation, you know, that sort of that moment where you're not quite in menstruation, but the end of the cycle, you know, the end of the cycle is there and you're completely emptied out in that crossing. That's a really unknown moment. And yeah, to trust that, to just give in to that. And that's, you know, when you're doing cycle awareness, you get to trust that more and more. It's a very radical act. And it's extraordinary, isn't it, Sjanie, how that daring to step away from the, you know, the to-do lists and the focus and everything, to just step away and to drop and empty, how this whole other territory opens up, and suddenly stuff is there for you, ideas, thoughts, all sorts of things, feelings come. It's very wonderful.
I've got chills all over me. Oh, I'm like, whoa. I love the way that even though you both teach this so much, every time you share, it's like you're sharing for the first time. Like I feel like the newness and the excitement with both of you. Like I don't feel like that you're spouting off like things that it's like coming back out again. Like it's just so exciting. That gives like more energy to it as well.
It is so exciting. And to be honest, we're saying things now we've not really said in this way ever before.
Yeah, it always comes out of
yeah, it does. Yeah, it keeps us very alive with it as well. Yeah.
Yeah, I love it. Beautiful. And will you just talk us through the phases of the creative process?
Yeah, so I mentioned the first one there, vision. And the one that follows that we have called play. And then following that is flow, and then discern. And then actually when you come back round to vision, we call it potentize, which is sort of like vision 2.0. You come back to the vision, but you're in a new iteration of it. You're sort of tapped into a new level of connection with it, maybe more of the potency within it sort of comes alive a bit more every time you come back round. So those phases of the creative cycle are the phases that you move through when you create anything, when you go from nothing to the inspiration or idea and then to the kind of completion of it. But much like the menstrual cycle, many times we have to go round and round the creative cycle, which you probably did as well, Chloe. You know, you go round and round the creative cycle, and you also go through little mini rounds of the creative cycle within each phase. And then that ultimately leads to the kind of final culmination or completion of the project. So it's a very iterative process. And I mean, this is implicit in what I'm saying, but I just want to name it that, you know, what we're saying here is that creativity is cyclical. And oftentimes it's just thought of as like the doing of the thing, but it isn't just the doing of the thing. That's just one aspect of the creative cycle. There are all these other facets, just as there are in the menstrual cycle. You know, it isn't just the inner summer. It's all the rest too. So yes.
Yeah. Oh, so beautiful. And you know, as you were talking, I realized that the idea for my moon power came whilst I was at Wild Power in the London course, but I was also menstruating as well.
So that was when the idea came.
Yeah.
I was wondering, Chloe, wow.
Yeah. That's when the idea came.
And so tell me, like if you want to, I'd love to hear, like, how did the idea come? Because now we've got this finished product. I'm sort of curious to hear how the idea or the vision landed. And
so it came with, so when I learnt the blueprint of the cycle,
yeah,
and I think this happens to so many women, is you just want to share and you're like, how did I not know this at school? How does everyone not know this? Like, this would have just helped my life so much if I had had that awareness. And I think that there can often be a sadness there as well, because you think, God, all those years when I was really beating myself up in like my autumn phase, when I could have been extra loving and supportive. And, you know, like now when I'm in autumn, if I'm feeling swollen, or if I'm feeling like, oh, that my world's imploding, I'm not even joking, I literally go like this and I'm like, oh, my darling, hey, my love, what do you need right now? What do you need? And I literally like, I talk out loud.
Yeah.
That's how I've, you know, like soothe myself in these times, which is still challenging, of course, you know. But back to your question. So when the blueprint of the cycle came into my awareness, and I already had my really good friend Rich, who was the perfumer, and he said to me one day, he was like, you know, Chloe, if you want to make something, just let me know. And then I learned about the blueprint, and then I went into like my experience of what it was. And I thought, you know what, not everybody is going to go to a menstrual cycle awareness class, because you've got to be really you've got to be really into it to go to a class. You've got to have like this thing of like wanting to know, or wanting to do self-development work, or, you know, just the normal person isn't going to be like, oh yeah, I'd love to learn about my periods. Do you know what I mean? Like, I just didn't think they were. And,
let me interrupt you there. Just say we are envisaging what's the word? A world in which every person does want to know.
And I envisage that world as well.
Yeah.
But what I felt was that through the vehicle of essential oils was another gateway.
Yeah.
That so many women or menstruating people love oils. They love smelling things. We love and work with essential oils already. And so for me, I was like, oh my goodness, I could share this wisdom, but kind of like from like a different angle, and a different shop front, if you will. And so that was how I thought about it. And then I was like, you know, so I can have the shop front with the oils, then send them off to you and they could do the deep dive.
Perfect. Yeah. So it really, the kind of vision was really to share menstrual cycle awareness with more people. That was what was the purpose behind it. Wow, that's beautiful. Well, I would say that my experience of the oils, and they're the kind of thing that I would want to buy for my friends as a birthday present. I would want to tell people about it. They have that quality of just making me want to tell everyone about them. So I think you fulfilled your mission on that front. Is that very shareable?
I love it. And then also I wanted to touch on as well, so with the creative process with the oils too, you know, it's so the idea came in menstruation. I only just got that this second now, and then I stayed with it for a really, really long time. And then when I went into the phase that you're calling play, I remember having it as like this little seed of an idea, and I held it so close, and I didn't tell hardly anyone about it, because it felt so precious and so like I knew that I had to nurture it, and like that spring energy where you're in that you know, in that delicateness if you're growing up to the light. And so with the idea, I held it so close, and I only told a very few amount of people, and I said, please don't tell anybody, don't tell anyone. And then I went into like the creation of it all, and, you know, like this bottle, this design, and all of the create. And then when I came into the what do you call the
discern?
Discern. Okay, then I made samples and sent them to 30 women and got them all to try them and give me feedback. So it was like, that was when it was kind of like out in the world, getting other people's critique and like, what did they think? Like, and then like the writing, I had to, you know, I had beautiful sisters that helped me you know, read through it, and like I was like, am I doing justice to what's being said here? And then again, like back into the void, because when you birth something too, I think the birthing of a creative project is a birth into death as well.
Mm-hmm.
Like you're letting something go, and it's like going off into the world, and you've held it so close for so long, and then it's got to do its own thing, and it's out doing its own thing.
My God, that's profound. Birth into death. It's birth into an unknown. You can't control it. It's you have. Wow.
Yeah. And then there's also a part of me, and I felt like this with my book as well, that you're sort of like, oh, now what? Because that part of you has been birthed, and like there's void like space too.
Yeah.
Yes, that's yes, that's very, very important to remember that with any creative project. Because it's filled you for so long, filled you, and now you launch it out into the world and you're bereft. There's nothing. It is a kind of death. You are, I step into it after any creative project, and I don't know who I am anymore. And I'm going, yeah, what's it all about?
Totally, because it's like there's a high, but then there's like it is a low. You get sort of like coming back again.
Yeah.
And I wish that I had known about this when I'd written my book, because when I wrote my book, I actually thought like I was going into a bit of a depression, and I couldn't understand why I felt low. But now, knowing with the oils, I was much more tender with myself, and I knew that I would have a dip. And so just like let myself go into that, and just knew that it was like part of the creative process again.
Yeah, that is so right. Go on, Alexandra.
I was just thinking that also, if you're practicing menstrual cycle awareness, you learn to trust those moments of the low, the emptiness, because they happen just towards the end of the menstrual cycle, before the end of the autumn, the premenstruum. There is a sort of, that's the darkest part. And there's some people can fall into quite a bleak place there. There is a huge emptiness just before you start bleeding. And each menstrual month, as you learn to meet that place where you feel like, oh, what's it all about? All you're more vulnerable, and you're just feeling like, oh no, you're not very good at whatever.
You do have a kind of amnesia that comes over you.
Yeah.
At the end of creating something, or at the end of your cycle, you almost can't remember who you are, or what you've done, or why you've done it. It's a very interesting kind of separation that we go into, where we don't, as you say, don't know ourselves. Yeah, it's a very strong state actually to navigate through.
Yeah, and if you're practicing menstrual cycle awareness, you get to sort of
get comfortable there.
Yeah, get comfortable there, and also then actually something else can actually open there. I would say too much more now. But yeah, you learn to navigate those transitional spaces, because it's a transitional space. You've just done something, but the new hasn't arrived yet, and you're now in this sort of gap in between things.
Yeah, so powerful. I love that. I was so grateful that was part of our teaching in the Red School, because I feel like it gave me a blueprint, it gave me a map, and then I was like, oh yeah, this is exactly what's meant to be happening.
Exactly.
Yeah. And then I really want to ask you this question, Alexandra. So the inner seasons, everybody talks about the inner seasons now, like it is implanted in the sharing of menstrual cycle teachings, and this came to you. This is so incredible. Like what happened? Were you like looking outside one day and you were like, oh, I feel like spring, I feel like summer? Like what was that? How did it land?
Well, it was stages actually, because initially we started with my colleague, and this was when I was in Australia, and this is where all the initial work was birthed, was when I was living in Australia. I was there for 25 years. And we were running these menstrual health workshops, and I was trying to induct people into this idea of just moving through, different states. And my lovely friend Amy came up with this phrase, walking the good red road. And we did this exercise where we would walk through the seasons, but we weren't talking, it wasn't still yet quite the inner seasons. We were drawing upon outer seasons. And actually the good red road is, I think, a Native American term. And but it wasn't but it was where there was initial something, but it wasn't the idea of the inner seasons actually dropped in when I was working on the
pill book.
The pill book. And I remember, I can often remember where I am when ideas pop in. I was sitting up in bed and I suddenly thought, oh, hang on a moment. Yeah, these are inner states. That it was very different to what we were trying to do in the workshop. There are inner states within us that we inhabit, and that there are sort of powers that you have in those times that sort of open up. And I just remember particularly the premenstruum and the sort of opening up to more sort of psychic, intuitive sensibilities that happened at that time. And I do remember that one standing out. And I think I might have started with that almost, and then started sort of clocking the other phases. So that's when I started using the term the inner seasons of the cycle. And then from there, it grew and developed into what we teach today, which is, very sophisticated. So we talk about we talk about these states as having both very particular power. Each season holds very particular powers that are amplified at that time. So your sort of, for instance, the psychic sensibilities, can be amplified at that time in the autumn of your cycle, inner autumn. And so there are very particular powers that come to the fore in each phase, but also each inner season is a developmental stage in our psycho-spiritual development. And this is what Sjanie and I together really crafted and have articulated more and more clearly. And also the idea of the inner seasons and the crossover days from one season to another. So that is all original to us at Red School. So yes, it was
amazing.
Dropped in one day.
And how do you both feel with so much menstrual cycle work going on in the world now? Yeah,
it's amazing. This is
idea.
This is the incredible thing with the passage of time, is we have set so many intentions and we have visioned and really called in the reality that we're seeing in the world now. Because no one was talking about the menstrual cycle at all. And I mean, really, from the time that Wild Power came out in 2017, there was a complete zeitgeist shift, and all our intentions are coming to pass. And it is such an incredibly blissful, awe-inspiring thing to look around and go, wow, yeah, people are including menstrual cycle awareness in their practices, in their education, in their lives, in their, it is just taking off everywhere. It's brilliant. And there's a long way to go. So, we've got the next vision.
Yeah. Oh my God, I can't wait for the next vision.
Next iteration of our vision.
Yeah.
Oh, well, I just want to say thank you so much for joining us today. It's just been my absolute honor to talk to you both. And I honestly really mean it when I said this, that you both had such a huge impact on my life and like changing the trajectory for me. And I will always be so grateful. And so thank you. And so thank you for making the time and speaking to us today as well.
Thank you, Chloe. It has been really such an absolute pleasure, really.
Yeah, I have to second Sjanie. It's just honestly a joy. And your oils are, speaking of exquisite, your oils are exquisite and impeccable.
Yeah, and potent. Yeah, I use them every day.
Absolutely. Oh my goodness. Do you have a favorite?
I think it's probably the inner winter. Yeah. I keep kind of going, oh, can I call this inner winter yet? I'm feeling a bit voidy. Surely I can start using this oil now. Yeah, I love it.
What about you, Alexandra? Do you have a favorite?
don't actually have a favorite yet. I'm not sure. What I particularly like is, and I thought this probably took you a long time, how you came up with the one word for each season. I bet you sweated over that one.
Oh my God.
I mean, it looks so simple and it looks so obvious. I just love that, you know, it looks so simple, so obvious. And I bet, my God, I bet she sweated, you know, 6 years over those 4 words.
I don't know how long it took me. I just don't know. But it's like that, what you said, you just forget all these things. You just can't. But yeah. I don't even remember when they came, but I feel like that each word, I feel like every time I see it, I'm like, yes, that's it.
Oh,
yes, that feels it.
yeah.
So interesting.
But I'm the same actually. I feel like that each oil becomes my favorite in the phases.
Mm.
And that's what happens to me. I'm like, when I come round to the next phase, I'm like, oh yeah, I'm ready for this one now.
I'm ready for this, yeah.
I feel like that my inner autumn is really long though, so I feel like I'm always using the inner autumn the most.
Yeah, you actually learn, don't you, which oil, you know, you zip which oils you go through faster,
Yeah,
so
exactly.
you get a feel for the length of your season. Yeah, when I'm using the oils, I have just this wonderful feeling of the quality, the absolute yumminess of the quality. There's not a scintilla of crap in literal terms, you know, of sort of chemical toxic sort of stuff, but also not a scintilla of sort of energetic disturbance. Just honestly, I mean, I was a bit gobsmacked when I first, you know, opened it up and tried that. I was like, oh, the whole package. You've done, you should be patting yourself on your back mightily, Clay.
Oh, thank you so much. Thank you. And to be honest, as well, with the way that they're made, so they're made in the fragrance house, and I went to go and visit them whilst they were making the oils. And they actually, before they make the oils, there's an intention that they set before they started mixing them and everything, so that they're absolutely alive. Like they're alive with the plants, but they're alive with my intention.
Yeah.
They're alive also with the people that are mixing them for me as well.
Oh, well.
Yeah.
It shows.
I can feel it. I can feel it, Chloe. Yeah, that makes so much sense. It's very interesting receiving an experience of a product and feeling the depth and breadth and aliveness of it, which comes from all that energetic work and intentionality and all that incredible discernment that you've done to come to just the thing that is it. Yeah, it's so beautiful.
Oh, thank you so much. Oh, thank you.
Thank you, Chloe.
Thank you.